Dear students, today we are reading Chapter 8, Silk Road by Nick Middleton, and this is Part 2. Last time we mentioned that this chapter is a part of a travelogue about the author's travel along the ancient trade route called Silk Road. We mentioned four main characters. One is the author, who is a professor of geography at Oxford University and an environmental consultant. Then there is Tsetan, who is the owner of the car hired by the author for the journey, and he is also a guide. Then there is Daniel. Daniel is an interpreter from Lhasa who traveled part of the time with the author. And at last there is Norbu. He is a Tibetan working at an academy in Beijing who wants to carry out the pilgrimage to Mount Kailash. The author left Ravu, a place called Ravu, along with Daniel and Tsetan. Daniel is an interpreter and Tsetan is a guide. Before leaving, Lamo, the lady who had provided them accommodation at Ravu, gave the author a gift of a long-sleeved sheepskin coat, as they were going to Mount Kailash, where it would be very cold. Tsetan knew how to reach the mountain. He knew a shortcut to reach the mountain, and he said the journey would be smooth if there was no snow. As they passed through the hills, they saw some gazelles and some wild ass, Kyang. As hills started to push up once more from the rocky wilderness, we passed solitary drogbas tending their flocks. We said drogbas are shepherds, nomads. They were tending their flocks. They were occupied with their flocks. They were caring for them. Sometimes men, sometimes women, these well-wrapped figures would pause and stare at our car, occasionally waving as we passed. Well-wrapped, these drogbas were well-wrapped. It means they were wearing their thick woolen clothes. When the track took us close to their animals, the sheep would take evasive action, veering away from the speeding vehicle. Evasive action means they would run away, they would escape. To take evasive action means to move or to do something quickly. They would escape, veering away. Veering away means they would change direction suddenly. They would run away from the speeding vehicle. We passed nomads' dark tents pitched in splendid isolation, usually with a huge black dog, a Tibetan Mastiff, standing guard. A Tibetan Mastiff is a large breed of dog. These beasts would cock their great big heads when they became aware of our approach and fix us in their sights. These beasts refers to Tibetan Mastiff. They would cock their big heads. To cock their great big heads means to tilt. They would tilt their great big heads when they became aware of our approach, and they would fix us in their sights. They would look at us intently. As we continued to draw closer, they would explode into action, speeding directly towards us, like a bullet from a gun and nearly as fast. These dogs were very fast. As we continued to draw closer, to approach, or to come closer, they would explode into action. Explode into action means they would move suddenly and quickly, with a lot of force, speeding directly towards us like a bullet from a gun and nearly as fast. These shaggy monsters, blacker than the darkest night, usually wore bright red collars and barked furiously with massive jaws. Shaggy refers to something with a long hair. Shaggy means bushy, having long, thick, unkempt hair or fur. They barked furiously. Furiously means in an extremely energetic or intense manner. And they had massive, huge jaws. These are big dogs. They were completely fearless of our vehicle, shooting straight into our path, causing Tsetan to brake and swerve. Tibetan Mastiffs were not so shy and they were not afraid of the vehicle like the sheep were. They were completely fearless of the vehicle and they were shooting straight into our path. It means they were running straight towards them. This caused Tsetan to brake and swerve. Swerve means to change direction abruptly. Tsetan had to swerve, he had to change direction suddenly because the dogs were shooting straight into their path. They were running straight towards them. The dog would make chase for 100 meters or so before easing off, having seen us off the property. These dogs would chase them away for maybe 100 meters before easing off, before stopping, having seen us off the property. It wasn't difficult to understand why ferocious Tibetan Mastiffs became popular in China's imperial courts as hunting dogs, brought along the Silk Road in ancient times as tribute from Tibet. The author says that it wasn't difficult to understand why these fierce Tibetan Mastiffs became popular in China's imperial court. Imperial court is the royal court of an empire. They were popular as hunting dogs, and they were brought along the Silk Road in ancient times as a tribute from Tibet. Tribute refers to a payment for tax. By now we could see snow-capped mountains gathering on the horizon. We entered a valley where the river was wide and mostly clogged with ice, brilliant white and glinting in the sunshine. The trail hugged its bank, twisting with the meanders as we gradually gained height and the valley sides closed in. As they were climbing higher, they could see snow-capped mountains gathering on the horizon. The author says, we entered a valley where the river was wide and mostly clogged with ice. Clogged means blocked or jammed. It was obstructing the flow. The river was brilliant white and glinting in the sunshine. Glinting means shining. It was gleaming or glinting. It was shining in the sunshine. The trail hugged its bank, twisting with the meanders. This trail was going along the bank, twisting with the meanders. Meander refers to a winding curve or bend of a river. As we gradually gained height and the valley sides closed in. Now they were high enough and they could not see the valley anymore. The turns became sharper and the ride bumpier. Bumpier means uneven or rough, irregular. The ride became bumpy. Tsetan now in third gear as we continued to climb. The track moved away from the icy river, laboring through steeper slopes that sported big rocks daubed with patches of bright orange lichen. Tsetan was driving in third gear, and they continued to climb. The track moved away from the icy river. It means they left the river below. And this track was laboring. Laboring means working or moving with difficulty. This path was laboring through steeper slopes that sported big rocks. Sported means displayed. These slopes displayed big rocks. Daubed. Daubed means spread on the surface. It means there was something on the surface. These big rocks were daubed with patches of bright orange lichen. Patches means spots. There were many spots of lichen. Lichen is a simple, slow-growing plant that typically forms a low, crusty, leaf-like or branching growth on rocks, walls, and trees. Beneath the rocks, hunks of snow clung on it in the near permanent shade. Beneath the rocks, hunks. Hunks means a large piece, a chunk, a large, big piece of something. Beneath the rocks, these chunks of snow clung. They were gripping or holding tightly in the near permanent shade, the shade that was almost permanent. Near permanent means almost permanent. Permanent means lasting or intended to last. I felt the pressure building up in my ears, held my nose, snorted, and cleared them. The pressure was building up in the author's ears. We know that on a high altitude there is a pressure which forms in the ears. So he held his nose and he snorted and cleared them. To snort means to make a loud sound by forcing breath through a nostril. He was trying to clear them. We struggled round another tight bend and Setan stopped. He had opened his door and jumped out of his seat before I realized what was going on. "Snow," said Daniel as he too exited the vehicle, letting in a breath of cold air as he did so. Now they have reached high enough to experience snow. So as they were driving, suddenly Tsetan stopped, opened his door and jumped out of his seat, and Daniel said snow. There was some fresh snow. A swathe of the white stuff lay across the track in front of us, stretching for maybe 15 meters before it petered out and the dirt trail reappeared. Swathe means a broad strip or area of something. This area of the white stuff lay across the track in front of us, stretching for maybe 15 meters before it petered out. To peter out means to gradually stop or disappear or come to an end. And the dirt trail reappeared. The snow continued on either side of us, smoothing the abrupt bank on the upslope side. They continued seeing the snow. There was this snow on both sides. Smoothing means leveling, to level something, to flatten or to make something smooth. It was smoothing this abrupt bank. Abrupt means sudden or unexpected. It also means sharp. The bank was too steep for our vehicle to scale, so there was no way around the snow patch. The bank was very steep for the vehicle to scale. Steep means rising or falling sharply. The bank was too steep for our vehicle to scale. To scale means to go upwards or to progress. So there was no way round the snow patch. They had to go through the snow patch. I joined Daniel as Tsetan stepped onto the encrusted snow and began to slither and slide forward, stamping his foot from time to time to ascertain how sturdy it was. I looked at my wristwatch. We were at 5,210 meters above sea level. The author said, I joined Daniel as Tsetan stepped on to the encrusted snow. Encrusted means covered with snow, covered with a crust of snow. And I began to slither and slide forward. Slither means to slide down or along a surface. So they were sliding on the snow, stamping his foot from time to time to ascertain how sturdy it was. Tsetan was stamping his foot from time to time to ascertain, to make sure, to see how sturdy it was, how strong was it, how solid it was. I looked at my wristwatch. We were at 5,210 meters above sea level. The snow didn't look too deep to me, but the danger wasn't its depth. Daniel said, so much as its icy top layer. If we slip off, the car could turn over, he suggested, as we saw Tsetan grab handfuls of dirt and fling them across the frozen surface. The author says that the snow didn't look so deep, but the danger wasn't the depth. The danger was its icy top layer. If we slip off, the car could turn over, he suggested. Tsetan grabbed handfuls of dirt and he was flinging them across the frozen surface. To fling means to toss or to throw. He was throwing handfuls of dirt across the frozen surface. The ice would make the vehicle slide. This is why he was tossing the dirt across the frozen surface. We both pitched in, and when the snow was spread with soil, Daniel and I stayed out of the vehicle to lighten Tsetan's load. Now all of them were doing the same. It says, we both pitched in. To pitch in means to begin to work, to contribute to this common endeavor. They joined in and they were also tossing the soil across the frozen surface. We both pitched in, and when the snow was spread with soil, Daniel and I stayed out of the vehicle to lighten Tsetan's load. The car would be much lighter with one person inside. He backed up and drove towards the dirty snow, eased the car onto its icy surface, and slowly drove its length without apparent difficulty. He backed up and he drove towards this dirty snow, towards this part where they were tossing the dirt. Eased the car onto its surface and slowly drove its length without apparent difficulty. To draw its length means he was driving this certain distance with no apparent difficulty, no visible or evident difficulty. 10 minutes later, we stopped at another blockage. Not good, sir, Tsetan announced as he jumped out again to survey the scene. After some time, they had to stop again. There was another blockage. So Tsetan jumped out again to survey the scene, to look closely, to examine how does it look. This time he decided to try and drive round the snow. Now, this time they will not go across the frozen surface, they decided to drive round the snow. The slope was steep and studded with major rocks, but somehow Tsetan negotiated them, his four-wheel drive vehicle lurching from one obstacle to the next. As they were moving, the slope was steep and studded with major rocks. Studded means it was decorated with rocks. There were many rocks. But somehow Tsetan negotiated them. Negotiated them means he went around them. His four-wheel drive vehicle means having a transmission system to provide power directly to all four wheels. This was a four-wheel drive vehicle, lurching from one obstacle to the next. Lurching means making an unsteady, uncontrolled movement. It means to sway or stumble, stagger. They had to stop every now and then. In so doing, he cut off one of the hairpin bends, regaining the trail further up where the snow had not drifted. This is how they were avoiding the snow. He cut off one of the hairpin bends. Hairpin bends is a U-shaped bend in the road, so he was driving as to cut it. He cut off one of the hairpin bends, regaining the trail further up where the snow had not drifted. He was regaining, he was recovering or retrieving the trail further up where the snow had not accumulated. To drift means to accumulate. There was no snow there. I checked my watch again as we continued to climb in the bright sunshine. We crept past 5,400 meters and my head began to throb horribly. I took gulps from my water bottle, which is supposed to help a rapid ascent. This is where the altitude sickness starts. The author said he checked his watch again and he said we passed slowly, we crept past 5,400 meters and his head began to throb horribly. To throb means to beat, to pulsate. So he took gulps from his water bottle, which is supposed to help a rapid ascent, a rapid climb to the summit. We finally reached the top of the pass at 5,515 meters. It was marked by a large cairn of rocks festooned with white silk scarves and ragged prayer flags. Finally, they reached the top at 5,515 meters. This top was marked by a large cairn of rocks. Cairn of rocks means an impermanent human-made pile of stones, which we can usually see at the top, at the summit of a mountain. This cairn of rocks was festooned. Festoon means it was decorated with white silk scarves and ragged prayer flags. Ragged means worn off. It means torn, old and torn. We all took a turn round the cairn and in a clockwise direction, as is the tradition, and Tsetan checked the tires on his vehicle. So they took a turn around this cairn of rocks in a clockwise direction, as is the tradition, and in the meanwhile, Tsetan checked the tires. He stopped at the petrol tank and partially unscrewed the top, which emitted a loud hiss. He unscrewed the top means he opened the top, which emitted a loud hiss. To emit means to produce or to release. There was this loud hiss. The lower atmospheric pressure was allowing the fuel to expand. We know that the lower atmospheric pressure makes the fuel to expand. It sounded dangerous to me. Maybe, sir, Tsetan laughed, but no smoking. My headache soon cleared as we careered down the other side of the pass. It was 2 o'clock by the time we stopped for lunch. We had hot noodles inside a long canvas tent, part of a work camp erected beside a dry salt lake. So he said my headache cleared. I didn't have headache anymore as we careered down. To career down means they were going down. They were moving in a way that is out of control. They were moving fast. As we careered down the other side of the pass, it was 2 o'clock by the time we stopped for lunch. They had hot noodles inside a long canvas tent, which is usually the case, part of a work camp erected beside a dry salt lake. Erected means put together and set upright. The plateau is pockmarked with salt flats and brackish lakes, vestiges of the Tethys Ocean which bordered Tibet before the great continental collision that lifted it skyward. Here he says that the plateau was pockmarked. It means there were some small hollows on the surface, pockmarked with salt flats, with areas of flat land covered with a layer of salt. So the plateau was dotted with these salt flats and brackish lakes. Brackish means slightly salty. Vestiges are remains, some traces or remains, fragments. Fragments of the Tethys Ocean which bordered Tibet before the great continental collision that lifted it skyward, towards sky. This one was a hive of activity. Men with pickaxes and shovels trudging back and forth in their long sheepskin coats and salt-encrusted boots. Hive of activity means full of people working hard, a place where a lot of people are working hard. This was a hive of activity. Men with pickaxes. A pickaxe is a hand tool, a T-shaped hand tool. Trudging back means dragging oneself, trudging back and forth in their long sheepskin coats and salt-encrusted boots. There was salt encrusted on their boots. All wore sunglasses against the glare as a steady stream of blue trucks emerged from the blindingly white lake laden with piles of salt. All these men wore sunglasses against the glare, the shine, as a steady stream of blue trucks came out from the blindingly white lake laden with piles of salt. Laden means it was loaded, it was heavily loaded with salt. By late afternoon we had reached the small town of Hor, back on the main east-west highway that followed the old trade route from Lhasa to Kashmir. Daniel, who was returning to Lhasa, found a ride in a truck, so Tsetan and I bade him farewell outside the tire repair shop. They have reached Hor, a small town of Hor, back on the main east-west highway that followed the old trade route from Lhasa to Kashmir, and this is where Daniel left them. He was returning to Lhasa, so he found a ride in a truck, and Tsetan and I, the author said, bade him farewell. They said goodbye outside the tire repair shop. They were fixing the tires. He said, we had suffered 2 punctures in quick succession on the drive down from the Salt Lake, and Tsetan was eager to have them fixed, since they left him with no spares. Tsetan had no spare tires, so he was very interested to fix them. Besides, the second tire he'd changed had been replaced by one that was as smooth as my bald head. The author said the second tire he had changed had been replaced with one which was very smooth. It was not good. He said it was as smooth as my bald head. Hor was a grim, miserable place. Grim means gloomy. Grim or gloomy. Bleak or dreary. Hor was a grim, miserable place. It was not very adequate. It was sorrowful. There was no vegetation whatsoever, just dust and rocks, liberally scattered with years of accumulated refuse, which was unfortunate given that the town sat on the shore of Lake Manasarovar. There was a lot of refuse. There was a lot of garbage. He says, which was not so good because the town sat on the shore of Lake Manasarovar, Tibet's most venerated stretch of water. Tibet's most respected. Venerated means respected. Ancient Hindu and Buddhist cosmology pinpoints Manasarovar as the source of 4 great Indian rivers, the Indus, the Ganges, the Sutlej, and the Brahmaputra. Actually, only the Sutlej flows from the lake, but the headwaters of the others all rise nearby on the flanks of Mount Kailash. Flank means side. Here the author is saying that ancient Hindu and Buddhist cosmology pinpoints Manasarovar. It says it is distinguishing Manasarovar as the source of 4 great Indian rivers. And he said that actually only the Sutlej flows from the lake. But the headwaters means streams forming the source. The headwaters of the others all rise nearby on the flanks of Mount Kailash. The headwaters of the other rivers all rise nearby on the sides of Mount Kailash. We were within striking distance of the great mountain, and I was eager to forge ahead. To forge ahead means to progress. I was very eager. I was very impatient to move. I was impatient to take the lead, to continue.